morning. I was already sitting on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sunrise behind Karen's golf cart perched proudly on my roof. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh out loud. I could already imagine the look on her face, and sure enough, just after 6:30 a.m., her front door flew open like it had been kicked. She came out in a leopard print robe and bunny slippers, holding her phone in one hand and a small yappy dog in the other. Her eyes darted straight to my driveway now clear and then slowly traveled upward. She didn't speak at first. She just stared, mouth slightly open, blinking as if she thought she was hallucinating. Then her phone slipped from her hand and bounced off the steps. Her scream pierced the morning silence like a siren. "What the hell is that doing up there?" she shrieked, her finger trembling as it pointed at her precious cart. I took a long sip of my coffee, pretending to squint at the roof like I had just noticed it. "Oh wow," I said calmly. "Would you look at that? Must have been some kind of storm. Strange weather we've been having lately." Karen didn't appreciate the humor. "I'm calling the police," she snapped. "This is theft, vandalism. You are going to jail for this." She stormed back inside and slammed her door so hard it echoed. Moments later, I saw her pacing by the window, shouting into her phone. Two neighbors had already come out, rubbing sleep from their eyes and gawking at the sight. One of them chuckled and gave me a thumbs up. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I greeted the officer with a nod as he stepped out and looked up at the rooftop cart, confusion spreading across his face. "Morning, officer," I said. "Can I help you?" "I got a call about a vehicle theft," he replied, looking at the golf cart like he wasn't sure what to make of it. Karen came flying out of her front door again, waving papers and shouting about criminal charges. The officer held up a hand and asked to hear both sides. I explained calmly that the golf cart had been blocking my driveway for 3 days, that I'd asked her to move it, and she refused. So I simply relocated it to my own property technically. "Still mine." The officer scratched his chin, clearly trying not to laugh. "It's on your roof," he said. "I know," I replied. "It's my roof." Karen demanded that I be arrested immediately, but the officer shook his head. "Ma'am," he said, "as weird as this is, he hasn't broken any laws. The cart is undamaged, and it's still on his property. Technically, he didn't steal it." "You mean he can just keep it up there?" she screamed. "Unless he damaged it," the officer said. "You'll have to take this up with civil court. I can't arrest someone for moving a vehicle parked illegally in their own driveway." Karen turned bright red. For the first time, she was speechless. The patrol car eventually drove off, and Karen stood in her yard fuming like a kettle left on the stove. I could tell this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But what she didn't know was that this whole thing had just begun, because while she was busy plotting revenge, I had already started digging into her HOA files. The same files she'd been using to find neighbors, restrict property rights, and act like a queen on a cardboard throne. And what I was about to uncover, let's just say, the cart on my roof would be the least of her problems. Karen didn't say a word to me for 2 days after the police visit, but I could see her watching from her window like a hawk that had been grounded. Every time a neighbor passed by and looked up at the cart, a small crowd of laughter or whispers followed. Word had spread fast. Her precious pink cart had become the neighborhood's newest tourist attraction, an accidental rooftop monument to petty revenge. But while Karen stood in silence, I was busy digging. See, I'd heard whispers about how Karen got elected as HOA president, that the last guy resigned mysteriously, that some homeowners had mysteriously violated bylaws the moment they opposed her. It all sounded too convenient. So I decided to take a closer look. And by closer, I mean, I requested the HOA financial statements and public meeting logs which, as a resident, I'm legally allowed to access. I didn't expect to find anything big. Maybe a missing receipt or two. But what I uncovered, it started with something small recurring payments made to a landscaping company called Emerald Estates Beautification. I'd never seen them around, so I looked up the business online. It didn't exist. No address, no phone number, no website. I ran the registered business ID through the state directory. Guess whose name came up? Karen Louise Breckman. She had created a fake company, run payments through it under neighborhood maintenance, and was depositing HOA funds straight into her own account. Thousands of dollars. Monthly. It was sloppy, greedy, and completely illegal. That night, I sat in my garage staring at the printouts. A part of me wanted to go to the police right away, but the other part still amused by the sight of her golf cart perched over my driveway had a better idea. I started making copies. A folder went to my lawyer friend, another to a trusted neighbor who'd been burned by Karen last summer over a flagpole issue. I created a chain of proof so solid that if Karen even tried to shred one paper, 10 others would show up in a mailbox the next morning. And then I called an emergency HOA meeting. By the HOA charter, any resident could request a special meeting if backed by 4 homeowners. I had 10 signatures within an hour. Karen was furious when I delivered the notice to her door. You don't have the authority, she barked, snatching the paper from my hand. According to the bylaws, I said, smiling, I do. You should brush up on those. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning, and I spent the next few days watching her unravel. She knocked on doors trying to intimidate neighbors, left notes pretending to cancel the meeting, and even tried to claim that I had forged the request. But she knew the walls were closing in. The neighborhood was starting to talk openly this time. And when people stop whispering about someone and start speaking loudly, that's when the fall begins. Saturday arrived. The clubhouse was full. Karen walked in late, holding her clipboard like a shield. She tried to call the meeting invalid, but no one listened. Instead, I walked to the front, placed a folder on the table, and began reading itemized payments, business registration details, fake invoices, her signature. The room went silent. And when I turned the final page, that's when Karen snapped. You think this is going to ruin me, she shouted. I am this HOA. But she didn't realize her words weren't defiance. They were confession, and every word was being recorded. The moment Karen shouted those words, I am this HOA, the room fell into a kind of stunned silence. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Every homeowner in that clubhouse was looking at her like they'd just seen behind the curtain of a magic trick and realized the magician wasn't skilled, just corrupt. I didn't have to say anything. Her meltdown was doing the heavy lifting. But I did press play on my phone. The audio recording played her exact words back to the room, clear as a bell. Then I laid down the state business records, copies of forged vendor invoices, the missing money trail. There was no denying it anymore. A man from the back of the room stood up. Mr. Carlson, a retired accountant who'd once been kicked off the board by Karen for age-inappropriate porch furniture. He pointed a finger at her. How long have you been stealing from us? Karen didn't answer. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed toward the exit, but someone blocked the door. I hadn't planned that part. It was just instinct from the neighbors. They were tired of being pushed around, tired of the fake fines, the harassment, the fear of walking outside without being judged for mailbox paint or lawn height. Karen backed up, flustered, shaking, gripping her clipboard like it could deflect the truth. You're all sheep, she hissed. You wouldn't even have clean sidewalks if it weren't for me. Sidewalks we paid for, I said, with dues you stole. One of the board members, surprisingly quiet until now, stood and cleared his throat. I motioned that we vote for an immediate suspension and investigation of the HOA president, effective immediately. The room agreed almost instantly, a sea of raised hands. Karen shouted something about illegal procedure, but no one was listening anymore. She had lost her throne, her voice, and whatever illusion of control she thought she had. The best part, the motion passed unanimously. Karen's clipboard dropped to the ground with a flat, plastic smack. She spun on her heel and walked out, shoulders stiff, heels clacking like gunshots on the clubhouse floor. Her little dog barked wildly from her car window. Everyone exhaled at once. But it wasn't over. Because by Monday morning, a police cruiser showed up at her house, turns out. Stealing HOA dues through a fake company while threatening residents is more than just a civil issue, it's a criminal one. I watched from my porch as she tried to argue with the officer. She even pointed at me like this was all my fault. But the officer didn't flinch. They entered her home, came out with a laptop, a box of files, and finally, Karen herself, wrapped in a heavy coat and sunglasses like a disgraced celebrity trying to hide from paparazzi. Neighbors gathered silently as she was placed into the back of the cruiser. She didn't look back. For the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood felt free. That afternoon, I climbed onto my roof. With a winch and some rope, I lowered the golf cart back to the ground, still perfectly intact. I parked it gently on the street right in front of her empty driveway. Left a note under the wiper. Thanks for the view. HOA parking now rescinded. By sunset. Someone had added a handmade cardboard sign next to it that read, Exhibit A. The cart that broke the tyrant. The story of Karen spread far beyond our neighborhood after that. Someone uploaded footage from the HOA meeting. It went viral within days. People called it justice. Some called it petty perfection. But to me, it was just closure. And a reminder that when the rules get twisted, sometimes the only way to straighten them is to lift the problem onto the roof and let everyone see it for what it really is. Within 48 hours, our quiet cul-de-sac was anything but quiet. It started when one of the younger neighbors, Ricky the guy with the drone hobby, and a GoPro addiction uploaded a slickly edited video titled HOA Tyrant Gets Golf Cart Justice. It featured aerial shots of the cart on my roof, the HOA meeting confrontation, and even slowed down audio of Karen's famous line, I am this HOA. With dramatic music swelling underneath. It caught fire online. Local news picked it up first. Then national blogs. Then YouTubers with millions of subscribers started reacting to it, calling it the HOA Karen collapse arc. Memes exploded. People remixed her scream into dubstep. One guy made a Minecraft reenactment. Another started selling shirts that read, You park it, I roof it. Overnight, Karen became a symbol, just not the one she imagined. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was a warning. And me, I didn't ask for attention, but it came anyway. Reporters started showing up on my porch asking for interviews. HOA horror stories from other towns flooded my inbox. Some people offered to buy my house just because it was the car house. A neighbor's kid even asked if I could autograph their bicycle helmet. It was surreal. But while the internet laughed, I was more focused on what came next for the neighborhood. The board had called for a full forensic audit of HOA finances. The same audit Karen had once blocked 3 times for budgetary reasons. What we found was worse than anyone guessed. Over 5 years, she had funneled nearly $240. Zero into shell companies, landscaping, painting, window cleaning, all fake vendors, all traced back to either her or her brother's accounts. Her sidekick Linda, who always walked around with a clipboard and a smug face, had apparently been paid under the table for consulting services. And the fines? Many of them weren't just exaggerated, they were fabricated. Dozens of homeowners had paid out of fear, thinking they'd lose their homes. It turned out she'd even sent false warnings, with made-up rule violations never approved by the board. The audit team shared the results with the police. Karen was facing not only HOA fraud, but wire fraud, tax evasion, and identity falsification. The charges piled up like bricks. But even as her empire fell apart, one thing started nagging at me. Too many things had been done too confidently, too recklessly. It was like Karen didn't think she'd ever be caught like someone else had been telling her she wouldn't be. So I dug deeper. One night, while reviewing old email chains between HOA board members that had been subpoenaed in the investigation, I noticed something strange. Karen always CC'd one specific email address. Not a board member, not a contractor. A name I didn't recognize. m.garrison@garrisonrealtygroup.com. Curious. I looked it up. Turns out, Garrison Realty had been slowly buying up properties in our area over the past 3 years. Foreclosed homes, retired couples moving out. A few of the same people Karen had fined into submission. Then I saw it, a proposed development blueprint filed with the county just 6 weeks before I moved in. A plan to knock down 15 homes. Ours included and replace them with luxury townhomes. And guess who signed the letter of intent as community partnership liaison? Karen. Suddenly, it all made sense. The petty rules, the harassment, the fake fines. It wasn't just control, it was eviction by design. She had been working with a real estate group to drive people out and sell the land off. The golf cart on the roof. That was never the end. It was just the opening shot in a much bigger war. I stared at the name Garrison Realty Group on my laptop screen, heart pounding. It wasn't just Karen acting alone. She was a puppet, arrogant. Yes, but just one piece of something much bigger. Garrison Realty was quietly buying up land across the entire county, bit by bit, pushing longtime residents out with one-sided HOA tactics, then flipping those properties to developers for massive profits. In our neighborhood, we were just next in line. Karen had served as their inside bulldozer, greasing the wheels by fabricating fines, instigating conflicts, and using her HOA position as a weapon. In exchange, she'd been promised a massive payout, stock options, a stake in the townhome development, and most likely, a high-rise condo far away from the ruins she was leaving behind. But now that she was under criminal investigation, the rest of the plan was falling apart. Or so I thought. The very next morning, a black SUV rolled through the neighborhood. No markings, tinted windows. It parked outside the old Henderson house, vacant since Mrs. Henderson was fined $1,200 for a non-compliant garden gnome and sold out last spring. Two men got out. Suits, sunglasses. The kind of guys who didn't knock, didn't wave, and didn't smile. A for sale sign appeared in 3 different yards that same week. All were homes of people who'd spoken out during the HOA meeting. Coincidence? Not likely. Then, my mailbox was ripped open. No theft. Just pried and left hanging like a warning. 3 days later, I came home to find a legal notice taped to my front door. Violation of community covenant. It read, the offense, unauthorized heavy machinery usage and unauthorized roofing display. They were fining me for the crane. Even though Karen was suspended, someone else had reinstated the enforcement office, someone inside the HOA board, still loyal to the plan. That night, I met with Mr. Carlson, Ricky, and 3 other homeowners. In my garage, I laid everything out. The email, the Garrison blueprints, the paper trail. Their reactions were exactly what I expected: shocked, then furious. They want us out, I said, pointing to the printed development plans. They've already filed permits for demolition and construction. If they can get us to sell or violate enough bylaws, they can claim we broke the HOA charter, then legally dissolve the community protections. Carlson shook his head. So what do we do? Lawyer up. Already started, I said. But we need more than legal defense. We need to hit back publicly just like we did with Karen. Ricky grinned. You want another video? No, I said. This time, we make a documentary. We launched a website called saveourstreet.net and began uploading everything: emails, financial records, drone footage, even interviews with elderly neighbors who'd been strong-armed into selling. We submitted Karen's audio confession and the board's remaining silence to the local paper. Ricky compiled everything into a series titled The HOA That Sold a Neighborhood. The first episode hit 100,000 views in a day. By the end of the week, the city council called an emergency hearing. Protesters showed up outside Garrison Realty's office downtown. Reporters parked at the edge of our street, looking for interviews. But someone wasn't happy. That night, someone threw a brick through my front window. Wrapped in it was a single note, written in block letters: "Stop digging, no name, no signature." I swept up the glass and stared out into the darkness. This was no longer about a golf cart or a petty HOA. This was war, and whoever was behind Garrison, they just made it personal. The brick through my window wasn't just vandalism, it was a declaration. Whoever was still pulling the strings behind Garrison Realty had officially moved from legal intimidation to scare tactics. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. The next morning, I boarded up the window and drove straight to the sheriff's office with the brick, the note, and a USB full of evidence. I had everything: timelines of harassment, Garrison's, development filings, and financial records from the HOA that traced back to Karen and beyond. The sheriff listened carefully. He wasn't surprised. "You're the fourth person this month to report trouble with Garrison Realty," he said grimly. "But you're the first with proof." That's when things started to shift. We weren't just fighting a corrupt HOA president anymore. We were going after a real estate giant with lawyers, power, and deep political ties. I expected resistance. I didn't expect betrayal. 3 days later, I got a letter, official HOA stationery, signed by acting president Linda Hutchins. Yeah, Karen's clipboard-carrying shadow. She'd somehow rallied two of the board's quieter members and declared herself the new HOA head. Her first order of business: a mandatory vote to approve property redevelopment negotiations with outside realty groups. It was happening. She was trying to revive Karen's plan, this time legally. The community exploded. Homeowners packed the next board meeting, shouting questions, demanding answers. Linda stood at the front of the room like a smug queen, smiling through every protest. Her justification: this redevelopment will increase home values, reduce tax burdens, and modernize the community. Sounded polished, practiced, rehearsed, and it was clear someone had written it for her. But then, something happened she didn't see coming. Carlson, our resident number cruncher, stood up holding a thick envelope. "I did some digging," he said calmly. "Turns out Garrison Realty Group's vice president of acquisitions is none other than Linda's cousin, Derek Hutchins." Gasps echoed across the room. Linda turned pale. "That's a lie. I called the county registrar." Carlson interrupted. "He registered the deed on the Henderson property under a trust that Linda's name is on." Silence. Then I stood. "So not only did you lie about redevelopment, you've been buying homes in your own neighborhood and pushing your own residents out for profit." Linda's jaw clenched. She tried to speak, But the crowd was no longer on her side. The room turned into chaos. Someone started chanting "no more plants," and it caught on. That's when we triggered the clause we'd been waiting to use. Section 1(b) of the HOA Charter. The emergency board recalled it allowed any 5 residents to demand a community vote to remove sitting board members, effective immediately if a 2/3 majority was met. We had 47 homeowners in attendance. We needed 32 votes. We got 4 Linda stormed out of the room, red-faced, just like Karen had. But before she left, she looked me straight in the eyes and hissed, "You think you've won? Garrison doesn't just go away." She was right. Because the very next day, a cease and desist letter landed in my inbox. Garrison Realty Group was suing me for defamation, cyber libel, and willful interference with private corporate negotiations. They wanted $5 million in damages. That's when I knew we had them cornered. You don't throw lawsuits that big unless you're desperate, unless the pressure's real. And the pressure was about to explode because we weren't alone anymore. Emails started pouring in from other neighborhoods, towns, states. People dealing with the same scams, the same dirty tactics. I was no longer just a guy with a golf cart on his roof. I had become the spark of something much, much bigger. The lawsuit wasn't a silencer, it was a megaphone. Within hours of receiving the cease and desist, I posted it online with one caption: "Garrison Realty is suing me for telling the truth." The post exploded. By the next morning, my inbox had over 2,000 messages. Whistleblowers, activists, reporters, people from all over the country who had dealt with the same corrupt HOA tactics, and shady realty firms. Some had lost their homes, others were still fighting. Many offered support, legal advice, and donations. And then the real kicker, a nonprofit legal group called Protect Homeowners USA reached out. They offered me full legal representation pro bono. Turns out, Garrison Realty had tried the same strong-arm tactic in 6 other states, and they were already on the radar of federal regulators. This was no longer about my street. It was about every street in America under siege by predatory HOA letters and development cartels. We made a formal petition with over 100,000 signatures demanding a Department of Justice investigation into Garrison Realty and HOA corruption at large. And for the first time, lawmakers started to take notice. But just as the momentum was cresting, the ghost of the past returned. Karen. After weeks of silence, a grainy video surfaced online. It showed her standing outside the courthouse, flanked by her lawyer giving a stiff, smug interview to a local news station. This whole scandal was orchestrated by a few bitter residents who didn't like following rules. She sneered, "I will be vindicated in court. I ran that neighborhood with dignity and structure." They turned it into a circus. But that wasn't the worst part. Karen wasn't just defending herself, she was back on Garrison's payroll. Her charges had been reduced in a backroom deal after she flipped and turned state's witness against us. Her official statement claimed I had engineered a neighborhood coup using social media misinformation, and that I manipulated residents into destabilizing the HOA for personal gain. She painted herself as the victim, and Garrison used her as a public shield. They aired her statement in ads across local channels. Mailers went out to surrounding towns. "Is your HOA at risk?" They read. "Don't let online mobs take over your neighborhood." Garrison stands for stability. It was a full-blown smear campaign. But they'd made one critical mistake. They assumed the public was still blind. In response, we dropped episode 4 of Ricky's documentary series, The Queen Returns, Karen's Deal with the Devil. It included leaked court transcripts, verified financial records, and a damning voice memo she'd accidentally left on her HOA-issued voicemail. In it, Karen clearly said, Let them try to fight. Garrison will bury them in paperwork before they get a single lawyer. Boom. The story hit national news. Talk shows brought me on to speak. Legal podcasts dissected the HOA's collapse. One retired judge even called our case the Aaron Brockovich of housing law. But with the pressure building, so did the danger. One night, I came home to find my house vandalized again, this time with spray paint across the garage. Enough final warning. My security cameras had been cut. I moved my family out the next morning. But before I left, I did one last thing. With the help of some neighbors, we hoisted the golf cart back onto the roof. Only this time, we didn't just leave it sitting there. We attached a huge banner to it, fluttering in the wind. This is what pushback looks like. The message was clear. We weren't afraid. We weren't backing down. And Karen, Garrison, whoever else thought they could crush us with fear, they were about to see what a community with nothing to lose could really do. The courthouse was packed. Journalists lined the steps. Protesters chanted outside with signs like "Hands off our homes." And Karen was just the pawn. Inside, tension crackled like a live wire. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were standing in the middle of a national case on corporate fraud, HOA abuse, and homeowner rights. And Karen, she strolled into court with sunglasses on and a smirk, flanked by 3 lawyers. Garrison had spared no expense. Her entire demeanor screamed confidence, like she still believed she was untouchable. But she didn't know what we had. Our lawyers came armed with a digital fortress, over 2,000 pages of documented abuses, fraudulent fines, forged signatures, and internal emails. The biggest bombshell? A signed memo from Karen sealed with her digital HOA key approving early evictions on homes not even up for sale, including Carlson's, mine, and a disabled veteran who'd passed away the year before. She'd signed away our homes without our knowledge months before we were ever accused of violations. The courtroom fell silent when the memo flashed on the screen. Karen's defense cracked almost instantly. She shifted blame to bad legal advice, claimed she was pressured by Garrison, tried to plead ignorance. But the evidence told another story, one filled with greed, manipulation, and a hunger for power she could no longer deny. Garrison's legal team wasn't doing much better. Turns out, Protect Homeowners USA had dug up their own gold mine. Whistleblower testimony from an ex-Garrison employee named Marla, who revealed internal plans titled Phase 7 Reclamation, a corporate playbook on how to destabilize HOA letters, exploit loopholes, and acquire entire blocks of homes for pennies on the dollar. With her help, the federal case began forming, and the judge, he didn't mince words. This is the most brazen abuse of community authority and corporate collusion I have seen in my 37 years on the bench. Karen was found guilty of fraud, abuse of authority, and racketeering under the state's organized crime statutes. Sentencing was scheduled, but it was clear she was going away for a long time. Garrison Realty, their local division, was shut down. Multiple executives were subpoenaed. And our neighborhood, once the target of erasure, had become the flagship case for nationwide HOA reform legislation. But the victory wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in the way our street transformed. For the first time in years, families walked freely. Kids played without fear of fines, and neighbors actually talked to each other. We tore down the old HOA office and built a community garden in its place. The HOA wasn't abolished, but it was rebuilt from scratch, this time with open books, term limits, and residents who actually cared. As for me, I quietly removed the golf cart from the roof one peaceful morning. But I didn't scrap it. Instead, we mounted it on a pedestal at the entrance to the neighborhood. Polished, preserved, and sitting beside a plaque that read, "The day the community fought back." It became a landmark, a photo op, a reminder that sometimes the most ridiculous retaliation can become a symbol of resistance. And just when we thought the storm had passed, a letter arrived. It was from Karen, handwritten, sent from county jail. "You think this is over, but I never forget. I always come back." I laughed. Let her come, because this time we were ready. The end.